So welcome, Stas. Welcome to the American Dream podcast. The American Dream is alive and well, and certainly appreciate you taking some time this evening to tell us your story.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to sharing some details here.
Cool. So maybe a good place to start is, first off, give us your full name. When were you born? Where were you born? And then from there, we can start to dig into your story.
Yeah, so Nastasia Casamento. The Casamento is my married name. Was Abramovich prior to getting married. So that's a whole lot in first and last name being mixed together and difficult for most people to pronounce, which was one of the fun challenges of, coming to the US. But we'll get into that later, I'm sure. I was born December 31st, 1985, in a small town called Vukovar, which is now Croatia, but was formerly Yugoslavia. I am 37 now? My God, yeah. I don't even want to say that out loud. It sounds bad.
Okay, so you were born, sorry, what year again?
1985.
Okay, so 1985. Okay. And I think you said it, back then, it was still Yugoslavia.
It was still Yugoslavia, yeah. Yep.
Okay. So maybe give us some insight into, your early years back in Yugoslavia. And certainly, there was a pretty impactful conflict back in what I think, I don't know, you would tell me, but early 90s, et cetera. So maybe give us some insight into kind of the early days of all things Stas.
Yeah, so Yugoslavia, that part where I was born in was still Yugoslavia. However, many other countries at that point had already broken up. So there was already Romania on its own, there was Slovenia on its own, Czech Republic on its own, but this particular part was still intact. So you were correct. This conflict happened in the early 90s. So 1990 was really the start of it. So I was 5 years old at this time. Not that I knew much of what was going on, but you kind of learn to learn really quickly as events start taking place, right? So even at 5, I had a pretty good idea of what sort of danger was awaiting pretty much at every corner. And the conflict was between, the Croatian people and the Serbian people. It just boiled down to the fact that one group thought that they didn't have equal rights to the other one. And they said, you know what, we should have equal rights, and you guys are getting, more jobs, and you're getting preferential treatment. So we want to take over this territory. Now, Vukovar is a specific town because it's sort of the heart of that area and of that Balkan part, right? So everybody fought for that. There's nothing significant in there in terms of like economy, right? Like soil or anything that's booming. It's more of a, I don't know how I would say, symbolic representation, I guess, of that area. So that's where the conflict ensued, and it happened overnight. It was, from one guy shooting another one in a bar to all of a sudden military all over the streets, right? Just marching along, two different groups, one after the other. This took off within days.
Wow.
Crazy. My mother is of Croatian descent, interestingly enough. My father is Serbian. This was not a big deal back then because it was all one people, right? Everybody loved each other. Now, if you want to dig back into history, there's a big bad history there between the Serbs and the Croats since World War I, where, the Croats were on one side, the Serbs fought on the other one. Same thing happened in World War II. They reconciled after World War I, then World War II came along. They weren't friends anymore. Then they reconciled again, and then here we are in 1990, and it's like, no, we just can't make this work. So it was interesting to see, what side do you choose, right? Your mom's one, your dad's the other one. How's this going to play out? And my dad's dad was Serbian. My dad's mom was Croatian. So I think he's really a great representation of the neutral party, right? Like he could have gone with any side. And when I talked to him about this, he says to me, I kind of weighed both options and I made up my mind who I thought was right. And that's the side I chose to fight in. So my dad, in turn, right away became a soldier to fight for his quote unquote country that he chose to fight for.
Wow. Gosh. So what do you remember? I mean, first off, that's pretty crazy. You've
Yeah.
got both parents that could be on separate sides of the conflict, making decisions on where their loyalties reside than actually fighting. So did your father actually pick up arms
Oh
and
yeah,
fight?
my father was on the forefront of the war for 3 years. Um, and for those 3 years, I did not know if he was alive, not. So
Wow.
that was sort of, to this day, I mean, it was the biggest challenge of my life, right? You're 5 years old at the time and you don't really get it. You get it, but you don't really get it, you know? It's just like, you're just like, where's dad? You know, I just want to talk to my dad. So that was really hard, but he's a man of honor. He's very old school. And ultimately it wasn't even a choice of, hey, are we going to go with mom's side or dad's side? We're going with dad's side. You know, the man
Yeah.
runs the household. Like that's just how it was back in the day and back in that country. So what I remember, Derek, I'll tell you, is the alarms going off in the town. So you hear this huge siren going off, which sounds like a fire truck, only amplified by 10. You have no idea what to do. You see everybody running. We lived in an apartment building and everybody's running down the stairs into what would be called a cellar, really. I mean, this isn't set up. This isn't like the American basement, right? Where you've got a TV and a couch and all that good stuff. This is just where people keep their bikes, you know, during the off season and, you know, produce or things like that. So everybody's running down because that's where shelter is. And that just means, hey, the fighting has begun. So I remember running down those stairs. I remember being woken up out of a deep sleep and just hearing those sirens going off and my mom grabbing my hand and running down the stairs and hitting that basement and, you know, putting my hands over my head and just hoping it passes.
Gosh, and you were 5 years old.
I
Sounds like,
was.
right? You're very young, and gosh, it sounds like you have like really strong, vivid memories of this.
I think it's the PTSD.
Yeah,
Not to joke about it, but there's certain things in my childhood that are a blank. I
yeah.
could not tell you what happened at all. And then there's other things like that one where it's like I see clear pictures in my head. So I'm sure it left a huge impact.
So I'm just curious, like so the alarms were sounding, how frequently do you remember? I mean, is this like every 30 minutes, an hour, every day
It
once?
felt like nonstop. It felt like nonstop for that first month,
Okay.
because they, you know, they're only stopping when the danger is no longer there, which these people aren't fighting in the air. I mean, these people are marching down the street, shooting up different buildings and different areas. So this is going nonstop. They're not just going to go out for half an hour, shoot, and then retreat. Like this is a full blown battlefield. So all day, all night, these things are going off, and we're in the cellar. You know, you don't have time. You don't grab food. You don't grab drinks for anything. You don't know what's going on. You're just afraid that this bomb's not going to, you know, hit your building, and that's going to be the end of it. So you're running down there, and you're just waiting for it to stop. And eventually, they stop for a while. That's when you run up, get to change, maybe grab something to eat, and run back down, because you never know when the next one's going to hit. It's not like a timed event, you know.
So where were you living? Do you have any brothers and sisters?
So I have a stepsister who was
Yeah.
not with me at the time. She was with her mom, but going through the same thing. You know, she's 7 years older than me, so she definitely knew what was going on and kind of understood the scope of the situation a lot better than I did. But she was on the other side of town, in the same situation though, in a cellar there.
Really? So where did you all live? I mean, so your father picked up arms fighting for the cause. So it was you and your mother, it sounds like, right? Where did you live? Like, did you have a house, an apartment, and then you would rush to the cellar when the
Yeah.
when the siren sounded?
Yeah, big apartment complex. I want to say there was 7 floors, so three residents per floor, right? 21 residents plus their, you know, pets, kids, mothers, brothers, all of us were rushing down there. We lived in this big apartment complex, which was right next to the Danube, which is the second largest river, as I'm sure you know. That had a whole story of its own. But yeah, my dad picked up arms, and that was, you know, one of the last times I saw him.
So
Really.
how would so so how was there any correspondence with him while he was fighting? I mean, so basically what, you had to wait for him to come
I
back
had to
home,
wait for
or
him to
yeah,
come back. Yeah, I mean, there are no cell phones. It's 1990.
yeah,
You know, plus they're on the battlefield, which it kills me watching movies nowadays when they're showing wars and stuff and people have their phones out and they're taking pictures. And I'm like, how? And I always talk to my dad about it because I'm curious about these things. I'm like, describe how it really was. Like, is there time for things like this? And he's like, I really don't know. He goes, we didn't have cell phones at the time. He's like, but I'm telling you right now, there's no way I'm picking up a cell phone and taking a picture of anything. Like, he's like,
yeah.
everybody's running for their life because you're being fired at, you know, from the air. You're being fired at directly. Somebody's walking up behind you, behind a tree, around a building. Like, you just don't know where the next shot's going to come from. So we did not know where he was until about 2 months into the fighting. He showed up to the cellar. The alarms were done at this point. The sirens weren't going. We were making our way up, and he showed up and said, there's a bus taking immigrants to Germany. And he wants us on that bus. He wants my mom and I on that bus. And I remember, you know, my mom was crying and she's probably saying, no, we don't want to leave. We don't want to go without you. And what dad says goes. And we grabbed
Interesting.
a suitcase and got on that bus.
Wow. So you left at what, 5 years old?
Left at 5 years old to an unknown country. We no family in Germany. We don't even have an acquaintance in Germany. We have no idea where we're going in Germany. This bus is just taking women and children, for the most part, and elderly to Germany. And that's all you know. And you get in there and you're allowed one little package slash, if you can even call it a suitcase. And that's it. You grab whatever you can and you go. My grandma was living with us at the time too. So it was my grandma, my mom, and myself. My sister and her mom decided to go to a neighboring town where the fighting wasn't going on and spend time there. And my dad was okay with that.
And your dad stayed behind and
Same
continued
time.
to fight. Wow.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
how,
yeah.
like, I'm curious, why Germany? Like, why not Poland, or why not England, or why not the US? Why was it Germany?
They were the first ones to offer rescue. It's
Wow.
as simple as that. There was no other reason for it.
Interesting. So when did you get to Germany? Do you remember what year and how old you were?
I was 5 years old. This was three
Okay,
months
so
into
this
the
is
conflict. Yeah,
okay. So
three
you
months.
left that quickly. Okay.
Oh,
And
yeah,
you were
okay.
fleeing for your safety. I mean, that was the pure reason. We've got to leave, got to get out, you know, from the middle of this and go seek safety.
Yeah,
Interesting.
that was it. That was it. And you know, we got a kiss from dad before getting on that bus, and just remember him saying, you know, I'll call you and I'll get there when this is done. And that's it.
Wow.
That was it.
So that's pretty, you know, gosh, 5 years old, you know, and I think of like how fortunate when I was 5 years old, like I was born in Canada and I was 5 years old, pool, you know, both my parents were there, brothers, sisters, like nothing like that, you know, and gosh, I mean, it's, you know, there's so much to be grateful for that. Like for me specifically, like I didn't have to grow up in that type of environment. I mean, talk about being displaced at 5 years old, right? Just, you know,
Yeah.
starting to kind of come to your senses at that age in terms of what's around you, what's not, having your father go fight on behalf of what he felt was the right thing to do for him and his family. And the next thing you know, you're in Germany.
It's wild. And at the risk of sounding cliche, it really, I don't think I would be who I am today if that didn't happen to me. And I mean that. It's terrible that it happened. And it didn't just happen to me. This war affected hundreds of thousands of people and generations thereafter. But it happening to me 1000% affected me and molded me into who I am today. I'm so much more grateful for little things in life that most people just take for granted. So
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think that does happen a lot. People, you know, I think, you know, when I think of the US and Americans, I mean, gosh, the last time there was ever war on American soil was back in the Civil War. I mean, think about that. And think about not just the conflict that you grew up in, but how much that does happen across the globe. And here in the States, like, gosh, it's been over 100 and a couple hundred years or whatever it is, taking us back to the late
We are
18th.
so fortunate. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We're so fortunate. These wars are been going on nonstop across the world.
Yeah.
We're beyond fortunate. We don't even know it, I think.
I don't think so either until we hear stories like this. And it's like, wow, like we sit around and complain. I call them first world problems. I
Me
really
too.
do. Like,
Me too.
yeah. And like your perspective is, much different than mine, but I think of some things that sometimes we gripe about here in the States. And it's like, wow, well, hold on. Like, we've got it pretty good. There's lots that have grown up in environments that are challenging, and yet we get upset because whatever
Our food's cold. Our food comes out
our
cold.
food's
right?
cold, right? Or maybe we run out of something at the store that we don't have access to. It's like, well, hold on, some people don't even have that.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
your perspective is interesting. So all right, so fast forward. How long were you in Germany?
Lived in Germany for 3 years. So
Okay.
this bus pulls into a place called Zierendorf. It's a smaller town close to Nuremberg. I can't even say it anymore. I used to have the
Nuremberg,
nicest German accent.
Yeah.
I can't say it anymore. And the bus pulls in. I don't remember much. I just remember my mom grabbing my hand and we walked into this hotel. And that was kind of the beginning of our life in Germany. She ended up getting a job at that hotel as a maid. So she was, setting up rooms and doing all of that. No German, speaking nothing, just saying like, I clean, that was it. They hired her. I think they felt bad. And there were apartments adjacent to it that basically she made a deal with them that whatever she cleaned, she'll pay off the apartment that way. And then the rest can be kept for, food and life and things like that. I spoke no German. School was going to be the next thing on the agenda there, first grade. Got there, had no idea what was going on. It was crazy. It feels like a dream thinking back to it now, and not a good one at the time. Not a good one at all.
So how often, was your, I think you said your grandmother too. So she was with you in Germany as well, right? So it was the three of you?
She was, yeah. She was with me and she was sort of in charge of just staying home and watching me while my mom worked. And she worked around the clock. She worked
Really?
In the restaurant of the hotel during the night, I'm sorry. And then during the day, she was setting up the rooms and cleaning.
It's interesting too, like, I talked to several people that are first generation immigrants, and I always see, and I said this on the last episode, but the common thread, and I bet you probably have this as well because you learned it from your mother, but I bet you got a pretty strong work ethic, pretty determined, I would imagine, because our experiences growing up shape us, and what behavior is modeled shape us. And like being displaced, your mother trying to feed her family, working around the clock, like I'm sure a lot of that kind of bled off onto you and probably made you help drive some of the successes that you've had here in the States.
1,000%. I mean, I was a very observant child. I've always, been interested in studying people. It's just something that, I guess you're just born that way, right? So growing up, seeing her and how much she sacrificed, watching her come in tired, just feeling her give me a kiss in the middle of the night while I'm dead asleep, things like that, just understanding how much she's sacrificing so that we could survive and make something of ourselves, despite the fact that I'm sure she was in the mood to do absolutely nothing. I'm sure she was in the mood to just crash on the bed and say, I'm done. Like, what am I even doing? And so my mother is the reason that I'm alive today. And she is one of my ultimate heroes. I'm forever grateful to my parents, forever.
So did the German government offer any assistance? Do you remember when you got there?
No, there was no program in place. All of this happened so quickly that I don't really think that even the German government had any time to put anything together. It was like, hey, here's a bus, like get these people out, just get them to safety and we'll take care of the rest, or the rest will take care of itself, right? There was no real plan around it. And I think that's just what people did. It's in our nature to survive. So that's what we did. We survived. We found a way.
So at that time, Were you going to school at all in Germany?
Yeah, so I went to first grade. The hotel manager at the time who got to know my mom, love her and appreciate her very much. My mom's German picked up. I stayed home for the first 6 months and watched a lot of German TV, a lot of cartoons. Being 5 years old, you pick up a new language like this, like it happens in an instant. You're like a sponge. And really, the only person that I can speak Serbian with, or Croatian, or Yugoslavian, whatever you want to call it, is my grandma, who at this point is, elderly and is cooking and doing her thing. So I'm really just exposed to German all the time. It was an easy thing for me to learn at this point. So the hotel manager said, she's old enough for first grade. Like, we've got to get her in first grade. And I remember she signed me up and they dropped me off to school. And there I was, like, in a sea of kids, not knowing what to expect. And German school is something else. I had cooking class in first grade. It was the coolest
Really?
thing. Yeah.
So were there any, like, because I think you said there was a bus, so there's a bunch of you that got relocated to Germany. Like, did you go to school with any others that fled, or was it was
Not
just
that I recognized. Not that I recognized. And even if I didn't recognize them, there was no one else that spoke anything close to what I spoke. I mean, there wasn't a single immigrant in my class. I know that. Everybody was native to Germany, but very receptive, very nice. Not for 1 second did anyone make me feel inadequate or like I don't belong there. They're very disciplined people, and they were very kind to me. It was a really cool experience. They had these big, I don't even know what you want to call them. They like waffle cones, right? They look like waffle cones, but they're made of paper. And for your first day of school, your parents are supposed to load them with goodies for school, as well as some candy and things like that. And I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And, of course, my mom made it a point that to get me one as well, because I couldn't be left out. So I know that probably took a lot, but it was cool. I have pictures of that, and it's kind of a sweet memory.
nice. So you're fluent in Serbian.
Mhm.
Are you fluent in German as well?
I was super
Okay.
fluent in German, but I have not spoken German in years. But it's one of those things they tell you it's in the back of your head. It's like riding a bike. So I'm sure if I was exposed to it for a longer period of time, I could get it back. I know some words and terms and things like that, but I'm far from fluent right now.
Interesting. Okay. So first grade, right? You're in German, you're in school in Germany.
Mhm.
And then I think you said you were there for what, 3 years?
3 years.
So were you there, what, first, second, and third grade? Is that it?
Correct. You got it. Mhm.
And meanwhile, was your mom still working in the hotel business and providing for you all? Okay.
That's what she did. Yeah.
Did you hear from your father? I mean, because he's still he's still,
He's
fighting, right?
fighting.
Yeah.
He's fighting in the war. So that was my thing every night. My grandma was very religious, and so is my mom, really. I'm not an atheist by any means, but to me as a kid listening to these stories, I'm like, man, these sound like fairy tales. I don't know that I'm buying all it, but they sound nice and they're comforting. So that's great. I like it. So every night, my grandma would lay down with me and she'd say, okay, now let's say a prayer for your dad. And, let's hope we hear from him soon. So after that, we would sit by the phone too, and we'd wait for a phone call for a few minutes. She'd always be like, well, let's give it 10 minutes. Maybe somebody calls. And those were like the most exciting and gut wrenching 10 minutes of my life every single day, because I'm like, he could call, and I think once I got to age 7, the realization that someone else could call and say that he's no longer alive is also a possibility. So I think that hit hard. When I turned about 7, that hit hard because it's been radio silence for years now.
So you would
Right.
just,
Yeah.
so you would, you would wait by the phone every night, or was it like, did you expect a certain time, time of the week? It was just, you would just wait.
I would just wait. It was just wishful thinking. There was no rhyme or reason for it. Nobody said, hey, soldiers get a phone call, or there was nothing like that. But I think in my head, maybe with the help of my grandma, who had a great imagination, she came up with this story, and it was just something to give me hope and give us hope, really, just to see that he's alive. So we would just randomly wait.
So how often would you hear from him?
We wouldn't, and we didn't. We didn't
Really?
hear from him for 2 years.
Okay, so when you were in Germany, even, because I think you said you were home for 3 months.
Mhm.
you left Germany 3 years.
Yeah.
So basically it was touch and go when you were back in Serbia, right?
Mhm.
And then when you were in Germany, you didn't hear from for 2 years. Gosh, can you
Correct.
imagine? Like, you're right, because like, am I going to get a bad call or a good call or any call at all? And the uncertainty probably was unnerving, I would imagine.
It was
Even
unnerving. It was
yeah,
crazy. My mom and grandma tried to do as good of a job as they could to keep us occupied and keep me thinking about other things and you know, taking me outside and riding the bike and doing all these things just to not go there, you know, with your
yeah.
mind. So I'm thankful for that too, but it was a really long 2 years. And then finally one night the phone rang. It actually rang, and you know, I picked up. I don't know that I thought that it was my dad, if I'm being honest, because the phone rang. I mean, people did call, it just wasn't him. So I picked up and I heard his voice, and I think I just broke down. I couldn't even say a word. I think I just threw the phone at my grandma, who was next to me. And, you know, I saw her starting to cry, and it was like a scene out of a movie. It was just wild. I was just so happy to hear him on the other end and not someone else telling me about him, or someone else, period.
So how was your mom holding up? I mean, it's her husband, right? Certainly from your perspective, it was, you know, it's my father. I mean, how was she doing? And the only reason I asked that, like, I grew up with a single mother as well.
Yeah.
So I can somewhat relate. Now, completely different circumstances that I can't relate to, but I'm curious, how was your mom through all this?
She is stone cold. And if people didn't know that what was going on, nobody would have ever guessed. I mean, I'm sure there were nights where there were days where this would completely consume her, but it was never around me. So I never saw that. And obviously that was intentional. Um,
Mhm.
she's always been the protector. She's always been the one watching, you know, my emotions and feelings and trying not to unnerve me and stress me out and worry me. So this was definitely intentional or on her end. My grandma, not so much. She wasn't very good with the poker face,
Yeah.
but mom made up for it. I'm sure she was struggling. Talking to her as an adult, yeah,
Mhm.
it was beyond rough. She struggled.
So, and I'm curious too, like, is your father still alive, I'm assuming?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just curious, like, I mean, gosh, you were out, right, at a young age, but he was still there.
Yeah.
Like, what does he tell you about the conflict in the war? I mean, you know, fortunate you were only there for 3 months, but he was there for much longer.
Because of what he's told me, I can never watch a Hollywood movie that has war in it
Okay.
because it's not real. And I don't know, maybe actually, you know what? I'm wrong. Maybe it is real. Maybe these wars that they have on screen happen in other countries. But the war he described to me, it's nothing like that. He himself lost friends, childhood friends, cousins, um, people he grew up with saw do their first of everything, right? He carried a bunch of people, buried them, tried to bring them to safety. His best friends' brains were literally coming out of his head, and my dad carried him back to his wife, to the apartment. So he's seen some monstrosities, and I'm sure there's more to it that probably felt like I shouldn't even know, because why? Those are just his nightmares and things he keeps to himself. He was lucky not to suffer from, you know, a lot of those soldiers post-war turned to alcohol. You know, the PTSD was strong. Certainly, some of them committed suicide, uh, divorced, you name it. I mean, they went through it. For all of that and everything he's been through, he's about as sane as they come,
Really?
and about as calm as they come. Really mild mannered, and again, looking at him, you would never know that that's his life, that that was his life, and that that was his history. You would never know it, but he has seen some of the worst in humankind, I think.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, you know, his experiences, you know, are very life changing, I'm assuming, for him, right? And for you.
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to like so many people haven't even been close to experiencing something like that. And
It's
and we should all feel fortunate that we haven't, because it's life and death. And think about like having a normal life with your family. The next thing you know, it's my best friend is dead and I'm bringing him home to his wife. It's crazy. What did your dad do for work prior to the start of the war?
He was a very boring accountant in
Wow,
a
okay.
in a firm that produced duvet covers, right?
Interesting. So
So that's what he did. He had an office job and he was a coach for soccer. He was an avid soccer player and a really successful coach prior to all of that happening.
so is that kind of that so just the common man, like give me a weapon and I'm gonna fight for what I believe in.
It's, yeah, I mean, just morals above everything else, pride,
Yeah.
love for your country. And look, this wasn't a case where, every man had to stay behind and fight. This wasn't enforced. So there are plenty of men, young, old, but perfectly capable, that left and that chose to leave, and immigrated to different places. They found a way and never participated in any of it. And my dad, to this day is not one to fault anybody. Everybody's got their reasons and everybody's got their mindset. He just was never, ever going to leave that place without picking up a weapon. It's just not who he was. It's not who he is. And it's not how he was raised. His dad, who ties into the whole USA story, was actually a survivor of a World War II concentration camp. So
Wow.
whole male lineage, I feel like, of the family has really gone through something. And my grandfather's father didn't make it out of that concentration camp. He ended up dying from a disease, but he made it out, weighing a total of 40 kilograms when he showed up at the door, which I'm terrible at conversions right now. So I don't want to get into the pounds. I want to say that's like 80 pounds. It's around 80 pounds, right?
Probably. I'd have to probably
Thanks.
open the I'm not too good at it either, but it seems very light.
Yeah, so he weighed a total of 80 pounds coming um, out of that mess. Yeah, so
So your dad's pretty honorable what he did, his
I would
beliefs,
say
his
so.
morals, his principles. So again, a lot of modeling for you growing up. Like, I mean,
He's
gosh,
my hero. He's my
yeah,
idol. Like there's no one like my dad, right? That doesn't every girl say that? But
yeah.
really, he is my hero for those things, for life choices, for putting us first. Some people might think it's selfish, like he didn't need to follow that. He could have just left with us and
Hmm.
taken care of us. But I don't know that I would respect him or look at him the way that I do today if he chose the other route.
Hmm.
I don't know that I would.
And the other route being fleeing, not staying and
Yeah,
fighting.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Interesting. So where's your dad live now?
So my dad is now back in Serbia,
Okay.
actual Serbia, because if we want to fast forward,
Sure.
uh, the Serbian side wins the war, right? Um, 3 years later, dad finally comes to Germany, picks us up. We all get in some bizarre van, load up all the belongings that we had, which wasn't much. I mean, we lived in that small apartment and we're heading home. I don't know what to expect. I'm sure he's filled my mom into it, but we drive into Vukovar in this van, and we're now talking 3-4 months post-war. There's no battles anymore. You wouldn't have known it if when you drove into that place. Everything was trampled to the ground. There are very few buildings standing. There are no street lights. 5 cars on the road. How does anyone live there? And I'm thinking, like, what are we doing here? We can't go back to our apartment. That thing's been bombed and there's bullet holes in the building everywhere. Like, how are we gonna? What are we doing? Who lives here? What do people do here? How does this work? So, um, as usual, we made it work, and there were a lot of people living there. And slowly, it was building back up, very, very slowly.
So you came back, city was in rubble from
Mhm.
what you remember. I mean, where did you live? I mean, did you live in an apartment where there were bullet holes
Would you
and
believe me if
where
I told you that you just come back and you just picked an apartment?
really?
Swear on everything. That's exactly what happened, because think about it, this is chaos. There's no actual government, right? So nobody wanted to accept the results of that war either. And I don't know that it would be any different if it was Croatia that won the war, because the world governments really didn't know what to do with this whole situation. It was bizarre because it affected mainly that one town, not even the entire state or region, one town and a couple of the surrounding areas, but really a small area when you're looking at it in the big picture of things. So they didn't know what to do with this thing. And there were no laws. There was nothing. So if there's an apartment that's empty and nobody lives there, and it doesn't have a roof that's collapsing, you're claiming it. You're going in there.
That's wild.
Because what else are you going to do? So that's what we did. We got into one. And that one was adjacent to an apartment where my grandfather and my grandma lived. And they stayed throughout the entire war. They spent it in that cellar. All those 3 years they were there. So they've seen it. They never left. Where, they didn't want to leave. That was their home.
Was that pretty common? I mean,
yeah,
a lot of people stayed behind.
A lot of people stayed behind. They were just willing to take the risk. And talking to people as an adult, a lot of it was just, we didn't really think it was going to be that crazy. Like it just kind of happened overnight. And then once it got really crazy and there was no way out, what were they going to do? There was no way out. So they had to stay. So
wow. That's crazy. So you find an apartment, you're next to family. Like, and what, your dad just goes back to work, your mom just goes back to work? I mean,
I gotta tell you, I don't remember the details of how it happened. I know it was a slow progression, but obviously 1 or 2 stores were open with produce or food where everybody went. You stand in line, you get the allowed milk amount, eggs, whatever they had on hand at that time. And that slowly built up as any town really does after such a tragedy. But eventually my dad's job did open back up. Yeah, he did go back to work. My mom was a stay-at-home mom at the time. In her words, I've worked enough for my entire life. I'm good. And schools opened back up. There was a park right across the street from the building that we now resided in. And I came outside one day, just randomly. All of a sudden, all these other kids started coming out around the same age. And these next 3 years that I spent in those ruins and in that part of my life is probably my favorite part ever, because we had nothing. We were kids, we were war kids, and we some of us stayed and others like me came back to this. We didn't have anything else. This is all we knew. And we made the best of this. These are some of the best memories ever. And to this day, I have friends that, I speak with almost on a daily basis that were there with me, and we reminisce, and other people listen in and they're like, wow, this sounds so cool. Well, yeah, I mean, minus the bullet holes and being hungry a little bit. But yeah, other than that, we had a blast. We made the best of it.
Wow. So what year was this?
So this is 1994.
Okay. So and I think what was, obviously I think back to the early 90s, and I think the United States, I don't want to say intervened, but tried to create maybe some peace treaties and end the war essentially, right? Or what do you remember of that? And what does your father tell you? I'm just curious.
Yeah, not quite yet. So this was, they decided to call this area now, after they finally put some laws in place. This was called the Republic of Serbia, which, isn't a thing. They just named it this, right? You didn't have a citizenship for the Republic of Serbia. It was just that one small area. So later on, in about 1996 and 1997 is when the US got involved. And that has to deal with, Milosevic, the president there, and all that mess and genocide and whatnot. That's a whole different war, but seems somewhat connected. If you ask me, it's all connected at the end of the day, but yeah.
So that was, okay. So we're 96, 97. When did you come to the States? What year was that?
1998.
Okay. So walk me through that adventure, maybe start with, like, I always ask this question because I like perspective on this, but like when you left, you probably could have gone to a lot of different countries. I mean, look, Germany, open arms, you probably could have stayed, although father said we're coming back. But there are probably a lot of other places you could have gone to get out of that current situation. Like, what do you remember of the United States, and why the United States? Why not somewhere else?
American dream, right? No, in all seriousness, you're right. We could have gone anywhere else. Just to preface it, we did spend 3 years post-war in Vukovar, right? That's
Okay.
where we lived. After 3 years, NATO and some bigger powers got involved and
Okay.
basically said, this isn't going to work. You know, you may have won your little war, but that's not how it goes. This is actually Croatia. So in retrospect, that war was fought for nothing. If you ask the Serbian side, right? Because what does it matter? You fought, so many people lost their lives, so much got destroyed, and you know, you got your result, but not really. Now it's all being taken away, and you can't do anything with it because it's NATO. You know, they're 10 times stronger than our entire army, or if you can even call it that. So there was really no fight there, and you know, it's Croatia. So at this point, some people.
So hold on, I hate to interrupt you.
Yeah.
So the fight was between what is or was Serbia and Croatia, right?
Correct.
And then that conflict ended, and there was Croatia and Serbia. The Republic of Serbia was recognized.
Correct.
Then are you saying that NATO came in and NATO said, well, hold on here, that didn't happen, and then what, folded you back into Croatia? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So layman's terms, right? I'm trying to simplify it. I'm sure
Sure.
politically, you know, this is so much more complex, but I'm just trying to paint a really simple picture here. But yeah, that's what happened. They came in first as, you know, relief and offer some support. I used to run track there for those 3 years. So I didn't have sneakers, and it was called the City of Freedom Run. And I ran in it, and it was a sprint. And somehow there was TV cameras there, but I didn't have sneakers. So NATO came and dropped these huge containers of donations, I can only assume, of food, clothing, shoes. And we were so excited as kids, we just dove into those containers trying to get sneakers. Unfortunately, there were no matches, right? They were all mismatched sneakers. We didn't care. These are sneakers and they're coming from the United States. Like, just the mere thought of that was incredible. So I picked out these 2 pairs of shoes, non-matches, and those are the shoes that I ran that race in, and got first place. And this is somewhere, this was on TV. I got interviewed. I'm sure that footage is non-existent. It's not like I could ever find it. I wish I could, because it was pretty classic and it was a great memory. So that was NATO's role at first, to come support, help, make sure there's peace, because certain Croatian people, even though this was the Republic of Serbia, stayed. So they wanted to make sure, hey, you know, there's not going to be any other tensions and random killings. Eventually, it wasn't like that. And it was basically, hey, whatever happened, but this technically is Croatia, based on some border laws that were non-existent, but made up, I think, on the spot. And you had a choice. You either agree with that and take the Croatian paperwork, so you're now a Croatian citizen, and you take the passport and you move on with your life. If you don't do that, then you can leave. My dad, who just fought in this, is like, I almost lost my head for this. It's like, I lost hundreds of thousands of people. It's like, you want me to just take this and put my tail behind my legs? No way. So, you know, I'm going, oh God, here we go. This isn't good, because we can't stay. So we move for a year into Serbia. We cross over from what is no longer the Republic of Serbia, officially Croatia now, into actually Serbia. Belgrade is the capital of Serbia. There's a smaller town called Novi Sad, beautiful, right under it, about an hour south. We go there. My dad had some friends there. He again puts my mom and I into an apartment and says, I'm going to go to the US and I'm going to work for a year. And I'm going to send you guys some money, see if we can make it work that way. And then eventually you guys can come. How can you do that? How can you just go to the US? And how can you just pick up and leave and go to the US? Like, that's unimaginable to me. Mm-hmm. My dad went to the US in 1985 on, you know, a guy's trip with his buddies. Loved it, but had no intention of ever living there or going there again. So that's where my grandfather ties into it. My grandfather was born and raised in Greenville, Ohio.
No way. Okay.
A Serbian family that was born and raised in Ohio, but they were of Serbian descent. They found out that they had some land in Serbia that they had to go reconcile, but they were primitive and they didn't really know the laws and rules. So they said, we're going to go to there, reconcile this land, and come right back home to Ohio. My grandfather was 4 at the time. They went, got back to Ellis Island, and it was just, stop. Where's your papers? And they're like, what do you mean? What papers? They didn't have the right documentation to get back into their own country. The only one that was allowed back in was my grandfather, because he was born in Greenville, Ohio. They were not. They were brought over. So the authorities are like, he can go, but you guys can't. So what are they supposed to do? Leave their 4-year-old kid and, let him go back to Ohio? That was the last time my grandfather saw his hometown. He had no idea what Serbia was. He had zero intention of being in Serbia. He loved Greenville, Ohio. That was his place. He talked about, his friend Sherry and his porch and all these different memories, and then where they went and got bread and things like that. But due to unforeseen circumstances, they ended up in Serbia. So he had the citizenship, which makes my dad automatically have the ability to go to the US if he wanted to, based on his father. But it doesn't tie back to me, and it doesn't tie back to my mom. So we're stuck.
Weird.
My dad,
That,
we're stuck.
so those were gosh, and I don't know immigration laws that well, but you would think that, I don't know, maybe you would get citizenship along with him because you're his family and he was born to an American citizen, right?
You would think that's what would make sense, right? But I guess those weren't the laws. I don't know if anything had changed.
I don't know either, but interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So that's the plan he, concocts at this point. And, who's to question him, right? He knows everything. So we don't question anything. He takes off and goes to Philadelphia. Why Philadelphia? Because his sister's daughter, so one of my cousins, went there on a student visa and is working, and that's the only person he knows. So he's like, I'm going to go to Philadelphia, just like that. So he takes off. She waits for him at the airport. He gets a job at some factory, quickly realizes that he's making next to zero money, enough to pay for this small studio that he has, someone's basement really in Philadelphia. When it's all said and done, he can send over maybe $50 a month, which is not enough for anything. So this doesn't work. This plan is terrible. It doesn't work. And he's like, we've got to get you guys over here. And we've got to do something. And then once things get fixed back home, or the economy is back to where it needs to be, because at this point, my mom and I are not citizens of Serbia either. We have no citizenship. We're nobody. We're literal aliens, because the Republic of Serbia is not recognized anymore. Yugoslavia doesn't exist. And we didn't take the Croatian documents. So we're really immigrants, even in Serbia at this point, for that 1 year.
Yeah.
And my dad has nothing. He's got the US, what was it? Not the citizenship, the national
card. Yeah,
is it the green card? The green card, yeah.
Yeah.
So you know how that goes. You have to apply and then take the test and do all that good stuff. So that's us. And the next step was going through immigration. So we had to do it, the slow way, all the steps and the different interviews, and me going, I just want to go to my dad again.
Yeah.
Like, just bring me to my dad. Why can't I just hang out with my dad?
So how old were you at this point?
So how old am I? I am 11. I'm 11.
Okay. And then so I'm curious, if the Republic of Serbia isn't recognized anymore, and you have to potentially take Croatian citizenship, or you decide not to, or you leave. I mean, what if you just decided to just stay in the Republic of Serbia?
Well, you can't. It doesn't exist.
Or stay where you are, in other words.
Stay where I am.
Yeah, why couldn't you stay and not just take the Croatian citizenship and just leave? Or is that a legal status at that point?
You would have to apply for Serbian citizenship.
Okay.
Once we lived in Novi Sad, that is now Serbia. Has nothing to do with that area, and you have to apply for Serbian citizenship, which I don't know what the process was, to be honest with you. But even if I did, where are we going to work? What are we going to do? What are my parents going to do? My dad's not he has zero connections there. He has zero ability to work there, and it wasn't going to be feasible. We weren't going to make it.
So what year do you get your application approved to come to the US?
So the whole process took a year.
Okay.
Which is not bad. And actually, we went based on a strategy called reuniting with, a family member. So this was all based on trying to get my dad, myself, and my mom back together. And under the assumption that there was a liable threat to our lives, which there was. If I ever wanted to even go back into Croatia, my dad was on every war criminal list you can imagine. He was a big name prior to the war. And in a sense, not because he was like some big name, but because it's a small town and everyone knows everyone at this point. And he was a successful, soccer coach, and everybody knew him through sports, and everybody knew my grandfather. So we were a really well-known family. And then, as with any war, with things that are happening, stories start to come out. Some true, some not true. And guess what? There's 3 sides to every story. We know that.
So
theirs, ours, his. Which one is it?
Yeah. Was his life in jeopardy if he stayed?
Yes.
The States? Because he was essentially fighting against those that are now in power.
His life was very much in jeopardy. Believe it or not, 20-something years later, his life's still in jeopardy.
Really?
He hasn't been back.
Well,
He has never been back. He can. He's now an American citizen. He can walk right up there, hand his passport at the border. Nobody would blink and he could come right in. But he knows not to do that. There's still people that are alive from that war. There's still people that remember. There are people that rightfully so lost their family members and significant others. And whether he did anything or not, he's on the other side. They're going to blame him. I can't blame them. I would feel the same way if roles were reversed, right? So
yeah, I didn't even think about that. I mean, again, the Republic of Serbia is not recognized as its own country. So, and then the ones in power are the ones he's fighting.
Right.
So they're going to look at him and say, well, hold on here. You were part of the resistance. Like, you're not a friend of ours.
Yeah. And they had all that in the database, that this was a big thing. Oh yeah. Like, borders are hilarious in Europe, and you've been, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Have you ever been?
Yeah.
So they're hilarious. I mean, it's like a railing, right? And then you have this like little hut and, a computer, and you hand your passport in, and that's it. And you cross over, and 100 feet later, you're in a different country. But even with all that, they had the technology at the time. They had everyone's profiles on these computers. So when they scan a passport or even just put in a name, there's probably a big red flag right on his name. So he would have been captured. He would have been, probably killed, put in jail. There were war tribunals going on. That was, one of the things that Milosevic was affected by. But also these local war tribunals. My dad ended up getting a lawyer. He's like, I want my name cleared. It's not even about going to back there. He's like, I know I didn't do some of these things. This is crazy. Like, I just don't want this attached to my name. And this went on for 15 years. These trials went on, and he was acquitted of all of it. As a matter of fact, he had people from the Croatian side, because again, his mom was Croatian. He just never looked at it as 2 different people or enemies. It was just kind of forced. He had people from the Croatian side testifying for him and saying, hey, he saved my life. Like, he didn't do any of these things. This guy was like the most proper soldier you could find. He didn't come up to anybody and shoot him straight in the head. He didn't aggressively attack anybody. He defended himself, if anything.
Yeah.
So
that's nuts. I didn't even think about that, right? I mean, it makes complete sense though.
Yeah.
Like, you would think like there would be at least some type of reconciliation where everybody was somewhat, okay, it's done. We're not going to address the past. Certainly understand that there were some that they would consider fighting as part of the resistance, and we'll just let bygones be bygones, but that's not the case.
A bunch of his buddies are still in jail to this day. They were not acquitted, and rightfully so. I asked him, I said, did they do these things? And he said they did. And they're monstrosities, and they should be in jail. I don't care what side you're on. This isn't, you're not defending yourself. What these people did is above and beyond that, and just awful. And they should pay for that.
So these are war crimes that they're being
These are
held.
war crimes.
Okay.
Yeah. These are actual war crimes.
Wow. So okay, so it took you a year. Where'd you move first? Where did you go when you got to the States?
Philadelphia.
Okay,
Good
so
old
you went right to
Northeast
Philly.
Philadelphia. Straight to Philly, to dad's basement. So that was a shock. So
Mhm.
in the Republic of Serbia, while it lasted for the lovely 3 years, and then in Serbia for that 1 year, I obviously had a television. American movies are a big thing. American TV shows are a big thing. So I grew up watching, the likes of Home Alone and the white picket fences and the huge houses and the green grass. And I'm like, wow, the lights, the New York City lights, all of that. I'm like, this is incredible. I can't wait to see this. I was so excited. So I remember getting there. It was nighttime. We flew. They put us on like 7 different airlines because that's, the immigration is paying for that. So they're not going to get you a direct flight.
Mhm.
So you're going to have to work for this. And you're carrying around a little bag that has immigrant written on it. So this is how you're walking through the airport. Immigration something and the little sign, the little immigrant sign. I remember that clear as day.
That's
So everybody
odd.
knows who you are. It's hilarious. I didn't care.
Huh.
I mean, it
Yeah.
didn't bother me. What am I? I'm a kid still. I don't think my mom cared either. We were just trying to get home to dad. But we got there. It was nighttime, and I remember we were driving across the Ben Franklin Bridge from the airport, and I was like, "Wow, these lights! Like this all looks so big. Like you don't understand. Philly is huge."
Mhm.
We had, a total of, I don't even know what the number is, maybe 8,000 people in all of Vukovar. Like
Mhm.
that's in a suburb of Philly, in quarter of a suburb. So everything was big. But then we pulled into Northeast Philly, and there was a metal gate in front of this home, kind of unkept little home with a garden that the weeds needed to be pulled 3 years ago. And I'm like, what is this? Where are we? And my dad's like, we're downstairs, and this lovely lady is letting us stay here, and the rent is really cheap. And it was an elderly woman who lived upstairs in her home, and basically rented out this basement slash garage to my dad. And it was 300 square feet, maybe. It had
Mhm.
everything in that one room: a little kitchen, a toilet, and a shower, and one bed. So she said, the little one can come upstairs and sleep in one of the guest bedrooms, and you guys can go down there. And that was my first night in Philadelphia. I was shocked, to say the least. It was mind blowing. I didn't expect that. I wanted, Kevin from Home Alone. Like that's the house I'm waiting for. And I'm walking into Northeast Philly.
So what'd you come with? Like what belongings did you have with you? Just clothes, I would imagine, and that was it, or?
Just clothes. You can't take much else on the airplane. So this is us starting fresh and starting new. And they laid out this plan pretty quickly. My dad did. And the plan was, hey, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna make something happen. We're gonna get some jobs. We're gonna survive for a few years, but we're gonna build a home back in Novi Sad in Serbia.
Mhm.
So all the earnings that we make, we're gonna put a bunch of it towards building a home there, so that maybe after 5-6 years, again, he highly underestimated, we're going to go back home and we're going to be fine. And we're going to have enough savings, and we're going to live and retire and enjoy the rest of our lives. Because again, Serbia wasn't affected by this at all. I mean, life is booming over there. Everyone's happy. Cafes are open. Everything's good. So the plan is go there. My dad speaks no English. He can't get an accounting job. He's working at this factory, making beyond minimal wage. And eventually ends up getting a job at Labus Bakery as a delivery driver. He's wicked smart, and he's super, super, super disciplined. So he can read a map like no other. And he's doing these stops faster than anybody else. And he has no idea where he is, but he can read a map. So he quickly becomes the favorite driver, and the one that teaches everybody else the routes, even with minimal English. And my mom starts to clean houses for a living and nannies. These 2 boys, actually, who she watched and cared for until high school, who love her to death to this day, and their parents. And that's how we started our life.
Wow. So it's funny. So you had like you had your thoughts and ideas around what the US would look like from what you've seen on TV. Then when you get here, you're like, wow, this isn't what I was expecting.
It was not it.
Yeah.
I'm like, where is all of this other stuff? And ignorant, right? Also, there's California. That's where the palm trees are. And I'm like, where are the palm trees? Why is there no beaches around here? What is this place? And I had to educate myself too here at this point and look at a map, and talk to my dad a little bit about like where things are. But Philadelphia wasn't it. It was a very mixed culture though. So prior to coming to the States, I have never seen an African-American person in person. Right? So that in itself is, and not like, oh my God, wow, but like, wow, this is so intriguing. Like, how are these people different? Are they different? Do they see themselves as different? Do people here see them as different? Like, it just being intrigued as a kid and as a person, like you were seeing somebody who looks nothing like you, right? So it's just, it's normal, I think. So there was a lot of firsts, a lot of news. And again, I spoke no English. Start again. Spoke no English.
So I think you said what, 11 years old. So I'm assuming you went right to school, right? I would imagine somewhere in Philly, middle school. Middle school, I think. Yeah. And both your parents were working around the clock, trying to essentially take care of the family, right? Which was just the three of you at this point, or was your mom's mom with you as well?
No, she was not. So she's Croatian.
Okay. Oh, so she stayed.
She stayed. She got her documents and she stayed. And you know what? My sister stayed. My stepsister stayed. Her mom was Croatian. And I don't really think even asked anybody for permission. She was old enough to make her own decision at that point. What the feelings are surrounding that, I don't want to speculate. But she took the papers, didn't want to leave, loved her hometown and stayed with her mom. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So you go to school, right? And parents working, sounds like your dad is starting to build a little bit of an income. Your mom's working hard. I mean, what do you remember? I mean, because again, you don't speak the language. Now you're experiencing so many firsts. You're in middle school. I mean, what do you remember? And then like, maybe help me understand a little bit too, some of the things that like were eye-opening. I mean, you mentioned one, like, wow, African-American person, that's not something I'm used to. That's a first. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Gosh, there was so much. Not all bad memories, again, they shape you, but
sure.
So my dad's one friend who was also from Serbia that he met at this factory had lived in the United States at this point for like 20 years. So he knew his way around, knew English really well. And my dad asked him for help to enroll me in school because he sure as heck can't. He has no idea what's going on. So this gentleman takes me over to the school. I don't speak a lick of English. And, they ask, how old is she? Where's the papers, this and that. And I'm supposed to go at this point into seventh grade. So they give me an assessment test. And honestly, I look at it and I'm like, this has to be a joke. Like, this is not seventh grade material, because although my geography in terms of the US wasn't good, the rest was way above what this assessment was. And I'm like, how? Like, we covered these things. I covered these things in Germany in second grade. And some of these other things I covered in this poor republic of Serbia that barely had an education system in fifth grade. So like, what is this? So I take this test, and it comes back and the woman says to the gentleman, she says, well, she's way above like seventh grade level. So do you want her to skip a grade? And he just looks at me. I didn't understand what happened. I was explaining this later. He looks at me and he's like, eighth grade? And I just nod my head. He said it in English. I had no idea what he said. And I nod my head and he's like, yeah, eighth grade. So I'm in eighth grade. I skipped seventh grade. No idea. And I'm in eighth grade. So he comes home and he's like, she's enrolled. She's ready to go. But she starts in, a month. They need to get some things together. And my dad's like, great. Seventh grade. Are you excited? And he's like, no, I put her in eighth. And my dad says, in eighth, she's supposed to be in seventh grade. Like, that's a mistake. No, he's like, she's going to be great. She's going to be fine. It's like, she doesn't speak English. She'll figure it out. Hey, TV is your best friend. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Saved by the Bell. What else? California Dreams. I remember some of these vividly. Urkel.
Yeah. Family Matters. Yeah.
Family Matters. Urkel stays with me for that first 6 months. So we're still poor, but we're making enough to pay for this rent and to put very little on the side, because eventually we want to get out of this basement and hopefully rent an apartment. So I am 12 years old and I'm growing like crazy. And so my pants are not growing with me. So they're short, but I don't have time to shop. I don't have the money to shop. So this is how I go to school. And it's middle school and kids are vicious. So once I start, I'm speaking English, okay, enough to communicate and to understand. But I think this was before I actually started watching Urkel. So I didn't know who Urkel was as a character. There was these other shows. I didn't know Urkel. And I walked into school and I remember a couple of kids saying, okay, Urkel's here. I'm like, what is Urkel? And I had a dictionary that I brought with me and that I purchased. And I'm looking all over this dictionary to figure out what Urkel is because they're laughing. So I can tell this is not a compliment, right? But I don't know what it is because I want to fix it. I don't want to be laughed at. And I come home and randomly turn on the TV and Dad's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, everything's fine. These kids keep saying this to me and I don't know what it is. They're laughing at me. Family Matters comes on TV. And sure enough, I find out who Urkel is and the pants and all that good stuff. So funny, not funny. You're 12, you're going through these changes through puberty. And on top of that, you're dealing with everything you just dealt with. It's a lot.
Yeah.
So it wasn't great. It wasn't a great experience. I don't wear makeup, at this point, like I'm underdeveloped, probably looking at all the other classmates. I just don't fit in. I don't belong. And I stick out like a sore thumb and kids are vicious. So there was a lot of bullying, making fun of the accent. The one thing I was good at was school. So that's what I could stand behind. So, I'm the kid getting to straight A's with minimal effort. And my desk mate was an African-American girl called Janelle. So because I'm so intrigued, I'm staring at her during science class. And at one point she turns to me, she's like, what are you looking at? And I understood that much. And I said, oh, your hair. She said, what's wrong with my hair? I said, I think it's really pretty. She's like, what? It's nappy. It's not pretty. And I'm like, no, I don't know what you're saying, but I think it's really pretty. And she's like, are you messing with me? I said, no, I just really think your hair is really pretty. And she looked at me for like 30 seconds without saying a word. I think she contemplated because she couldn't understand that I actually meant it. Fast forward a couple of months, we became really good friends and she got to know me a little bit and the rest is history.
So when did you decide, because I think it was supposed to be like a 3-4 year stint and you were going back, but you stayed or you went back and came back?
No, we didn't go back.
So you stayed.
There was no way.
Yeah.
Once they started adding things up and realizing how expensive life is, there was no way that 5-year plan was going to work. That 5-year plan soon turned into 10 and eventually 15.
Wow.
Eventually.
So take me through. So you graduate high school. Did you go to college? Did you go right to the workforce? What does that look like?
Yeah, I started playing volleyball. While I was in Germany, there was a TV show called Mila Superstar, and it was about a little girl that played volleyball. I was obsessed immediately. And I said I wanted to play volleyball. So in 8th grade, in middle school, I signed up for volleyball. And the coach comes up, it's like, oh, I think you're going to be really good. Like you have a natural talent. I don't think anything of it, but I'm like, yeah, I'm going to keep playing. I'm going to go to high school and keep playing. So I go to high school and I sign up for tryouts. I make varsity my first year and win team MVP, which was really cool. So volleyball is, my escape and my go-to, and it helps. At this point, nobody can tell that I'm an immigrant. I have no accent, and I've created this entire image of myself that's brand new. No one knows anything. My name's weird, right? But they don't question it. And if they do, I just say, oh, it's a Serbian name. And nobody really cares to know more. So I create this whole identity. I hate to say this, but like, I'm actually popular, right? Like I'm popular in high school. Doesn't happen too often, but I am through sports and, grades. I was in a magnet program, which is a little bit more challenging than the standard programs that they had in public schools. And life is overall pretty good. I miss home. I miss my friends. This was still the years of snail mail. So there's letters being exchanged back and forth. But for the most part, everything's good. And we're in a routine. My mom is doing what she's doing, the houses, the nannying. And my dad is driving the truck and delivering bread for the bus. And he's doing that 6 nights a week. So he's doing the nightly shift. He wakes up at 11 p.m. while the rest of us are going to bed, goes to work, drives all night, comes back around 1 p.m., eats lunch, takes a nap, wakes up, sees me for an hour or two, gives me a kiss goodnight, does it all over again. And my mom's working all day long. She's working. She rushes home, makes food, because we always have to have a home cooked meal. I didn't eat out until freshman year of college, ever in the United
Yeah.
States. Never ate out, didn't know what it was to be in a restaurant. And that was it. Life was pretty good. After high school, while playing volleyball, I also joined a club team and earned myself a scholarship for Rider University over in Jersey, a
Mhm.
smaller D1 school. It was always my dream to play D1, probably my ego a little bit, but I thought I was good enough. And so I did. And that helped pay for school. That, and I wrote a couple of essays relating to this story, which got some grants and helped cover the rest of it. And that is how I paid for my college education, because there was no way that my parents could afford it. And I knew that. So I had to do everything outside the box to make sure that I could do this on my own. But I wanted to go to college, and I wanted to, in a way, thank them for giving me this opportunity, because so many other parents have not and chose not to. To your point, we could have stayed and it would have been so hard. And I don't know how we would have survived, but we could have. Other people did,
Mhm.
but they chose to give me an opportunity. So I have to give it back. And there's no other way to do it but to work hard, make them proud, and make something of myself.
Yeah, I mean, what a great story, first off. You know, the purpose of why I wanted to start this podcast was a couple different things. The first thing was to share a message that, gosh, like, I think as Americans, right? You know, certainly there's a tremendous amount of loyalty and pride for where we came from, but gosh, you can come to this country. I mean, look what you've made of yourself. And now, even if you fast forward to like what you're doing in the business world, very successful, productive, and you've created this all for yourself through the opportunity that's here in the States. And, you know, it's just wild that, you know, your story from where you started and where you are, and and a lot of it, I think too, is some of the things you saw from your parents. In terms of like, I mean, they were working pretty hard and earning everything they had. And a lot of that probably resonated with you. And it sounds like you took advantage of everything that you had, the opportunity in front of you to create a better life for yourself.
Yeah. And even the ones I didn't, I created those opportunities, right? Because sometimes you just got to knock on that door that nobody wants to knock on, and you never know, something great could be behind it. So I had to, I owed it to them. You know, they sacrificed so much for me. My mom to this day, you know, can't stand up straight. Her back's killing her. She's cleaned more houses than I could count.
Yeah.
And my dad spent more sleepless nights, and it wasn't for themselves. It was for me. And they did put money aside. And look, yeah, I didn't go to fancy restaurants and I didn't have guest shoes or whatever. But looking back, nothing was lacking from my life here at that time. I don't miss anything. I don't think anybody else that had those things is lived a better life. So, you know, I'm great. I'm grateful to them, always have been. And I owed it to them to do something and to make something of myself. They built a home in Serbia with their own, you know, bare hands. That's the money they worked for. And every summer we went back home to visit. They saved up for plane tickets, and I spent 3 months every summer there. And it was awesome. It was
Well,
perfect.
look, this is such an inspirational story. You know, you know, I think this story should resonate with many. I think it talks to, you know, for me, hearing this, being grateful that I've had the opportunities that I've had in this country. You know, and I think through the story that you just told, I mean, you know, I think America and Americans are pretty accepting. And, you came here with nothing, essentially.
Nothing.
And leaving, you know, a pretty heavy conflict. So you didn't really have a lot of choices, and you took advantage. You took advantage of the opportunity. Look at you now. So this is exactly, I think, I think I think these are the stories that resonate. And I think these are the stories that counter the message of, the dream isn't alive. This country is no good, and a lot of apathy. And I think what you're saying is, no, 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 you can take advantage of what's ahead of you with some hard work, some determination. You can too, be successful and achieve what you want to achieve. So fantastic story.
Thank you. Yeah, the dream I think is very much alive. I think it boils down to knowing what you want and being willing to put the work in, because otherwise it's just a dream. You have to do the work. No one's going to give you anything. And America has plenty to give, but you have to work for it. And I am grateful, forever grateful, not just to my parents, but to the country for the opportunity. I don't know how it would have been if I went to Italy, if I went to Germany, anywhere else in the world. I'm sure it's great, but I love my life. I'm happily married to an American man. I have 2 beautiful kids. I live in a house that's bigger than anything I've ever seen. That is a pain in the butt to clean. So I appreciate it even more. And when I do that, I just think of my mom. I see my parents twice a year. They went back as planned. I fell in love and stayed, and raising my family here and living my life here. But we go back every summer. As a matter of fact, on the 28th, we have a flight. So we're going back to visit. It's going to be a blast.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I appreciate your time, and thanks again.
Thank you for having me.